The valley stretched out like a scar on the earth, dry, jagged, and silent. Heat shimmered above the rocks, bending light into wavering mirages, as if the desert itself tried to mask what lay ahead. The Marines called it dead ground, a place where sound carried strangely, where visibility was poor, and where the enemy had every advantage if they chose to use it. Yet this was where the mission had led them, a sweep to clear insurgent positions suspected of hiding in the valley's folds. The Rangers moved in a staggered formation, boots crunching against the grit, eyes scanning every ridge and shadow. Their radios clicked with short bursts of chatter, confirming positions, updating movements. Each man was alert, the kind of alertness that hummed like electricity before a storm. They had been in firefights before, but something about this valley tightened throats and clenched jaws. The silence was not peace. It was the kind that waited to be shattered. High above them, lying prone on a ridge of jagged stone, was their overwatch, the sniper they called Raven. She had taken her position before dawn, hauling her gear up the ridge in silence, every step deliberate. The climb alone would have exhausted some of the men below, but she had carried it without complaint. Her rifle lay steady on its bipod barrel aimed toward the valley, scope already dialed in. She watched, waited, breathed with the land itself. The Rangers trusted their training, their weapons, and each other. But not all of them trusted Raven. She was a quiet figure, someone who didn't fill the space with chatter or bravado. For weeks, some of the men had questioned her presence in the unit, too untested, too quiet, too different. They never said it outright to her face, but their sidelong glances and muttered jokes carried their doubts clearly enough. Raven noticed, of course. She always noticed. But she didn't reply. She let her shooting speak when it needed to. Every round fired on the range had been precise, every qualification passed with ease. Yet she knew combat was different. Out here, mistakes weren't measured in missed points on a scorecard. They were measured in blood. As she lay against the hot stone, cheek pressed against the rifle stock, Raven scanned the valley below. Her scope painted a world invisible to the naked eye. The shimmer of heat against metal, the faintest suggestion of movement where shadows pooled too thickly. She wasn't looking for targets yet. She was looking for patterns, anything unnatural in the rugged terrain. A sniper's job was patience, and patience came easier to her than conversation ever had. Down below, Sergeant, the unit leader, raised a fist to halt the Rangers. They crouched low, rifles angled toward the cliffs. His voice crackled through the radio. Valley's clear so far, keep eyes sharp. Raven, status. Her reply was soft, clipped, professional. Overwatch in place, no movement. The squad pushed deeper into the valley, the walls tightening on either side like the jaws of a trap. The sun climbed higher, baking sweat beneath their body armor dripping into their eyes. Every sound, the crunch of boots, the click of safeties, the static of radios, felt too loud in the suffocating silence. Raven tracked their progress through her scope, her crosshairs drifting from one ranger to the next, then outward to the ridges and rock formations that loomed above them. She adjusted her breathing, slow and steady, syncing her body with the rhythm of the rifle. If the valley held teeth, they would show soon. For a fleeting moment, the world seemed still. The men below moved cautiously, rifles raised, scanning the cliffs. Raven's scope traced over a cluster of rocks that looked wrong, too arranged, too deliberate, as though someone had shaped them into cover. Her finger rested lightly against the trigger guard, her instincts prickling. But the radio remained silent, the squad pressing forward unaware. The valley waited, and Raven waited with it. The silence would not last. It started with a single crack, sharp and unexpected, echoing off the cliffs. Then came the storm, gunfire exploding from hidden nests, machine guns spitting bursts that rattled the rocks. The Marines were caught in the open, dust flying as rounds chewed the ground around them. Echoes collided from every direction, making it impossible to tell where the enemy hid. "Contact! Contact!" Sergeant's voice roared over the radio, his tone urgent yet controlled. The Rangers scattered for cover, dropping behind whatever rocks they could find. Bullets ricocheted, whining like angry hornets, snapping inches from helmets. the air filled with smoke, grit, and the metallic bite of fear. From her ridge, Raven had seen it coming. The odd arrangement of rocks she'd noted earlier suddenly lit up with muzzle flashes, and more fired from opposite ledges. The valley had been prepared as a kill box, designed to trap any unit foolish enough to enter. Now her team was caught inside it. "Send backup, we're outnumbered," a ranger yelled into the comms, his voice raw with panic. Static filled Raven's headset before Command's calm voice replied, "Negative. Backup ETA is too far. Hold position." Hold position. Against enemies dug into high ground already with the advantage. Raven adjusted her scope, heart steady, her body a machine of calm in the chaos. She knew what it meant. Reinforcements would not arrive in time. Her team would either break free or bleed out here in the dust. Below barked orders. Suppressing fire, left flank. Move, move. But every attempt to push forward met a hailstorm of bullets. The Rangers were pinned, their rifles rattling off desperate bursts that did little to dislodge entrenched enemies. Through her scope, Raven saw the battlefield differently. Where others saw chaos, she saw geometry, the arc of fire, the angles of cover, the rhythm of exposure when an insurgent leaned too far from his nest. Her finger rested against the trigger guard, her cheek pressed into the stock. She inhaled. A machine gunner at the far ridge sprayed relentlessly, pinning 3 Marines behind a crumbling boulder. Raven slid her crosshairs over him, reading the sway of his weapon, the fraction of a second between bursts when he leaned too far. She exhaled. The rifle cracked, the shot cutting through the chaos with its own authority. The machine gunner slumped, his weapon clattering uselessly to the rocks. One shot, one silence carved out of the noise. The Marines below paused in shock, unsure if they'd imagined it. Then another burst of fire pinned them down again, and Raven adjusted. Another nest, 2 figures trading bursts from cover. She tracked the first, waited for the head tilt as he rose and squeezed. Another crack, another fall. Now the Rangers understood. "Someone's hitting them," one shouted, didn't waste time questioning. "It's Raven, use it, push forward." Hope flared where despair had been moments earlier. The squad began to shift, timing their moves with the cracks from the ridge. Each report of Raven's rifle cleared another threat, carving space for the Rangers to crawl, then sprint, from cover to cover. But the insurgents were disciplined. They adapted quickly, some focusing fire on the squad, others sweeping their sights upward toward the ridge. Raven's perch was no longer invisible, it was a target. Dust exploded inches from her scope as rounds slapped against the rocks near her head. Still, she did not flinch. She rolled slightly, re-angled, and returned to her patient rhythm. Down below, the Rangers clung to every second she bought them. Their radios no longer screamed for backup. They crackled with determination, soldiers calling out flanking movements, coordinating fire, trusting the unseen rifle above. The valley had shifted. The ambushers still had numbers, still had position, but the Marines were no longer helpless prey. They had a guardian on the ridge, her rifle speaking louder than their desperate calls for aid. For every muzzle flash Raven spotted, another shot rang out, turning the trap into a contest, and she was determined to win it. Pinned down Marines screamed over the radio, the valley still alive with chaos. Raven pressed closer into the stone of the ridge, heart steady, breath controlled. Around her, bullets snapped against rock, chips of stone stinging her cheek, but her world had narrowed to the circle of her scope. Below, her brothers in arms were trapped, and the frantic cry for backup still buzzed in her headset. She knew backup wouldn't arrive in time. The decision was hers alone. Her finger traced the trigger guard, not pulling yet. Sniper training wasn't just about accuracy, it was about judgment. When to shoot, when to wait, when to hold your fire because one wrong decision could unravel everything. For a split second, hesitation whispered to her. What if she fired too soon? What if she revealed her position and became a target before she could protect them? But then came another sound, the gut-wrenching scream of a wounded ranger echoing across the valley. That cut through the hesitation. Her mind flickered back to sniper school, the long hours on the range, lying prone in mud and heat, pushing through exhaustion. The voices that doubted her, the instructors who questioned whether she belonged. She had carried the weight of their doubt with every step, every trigger squeeze. And she had answered it all the same way, with precision, with patience, with quiet certainty that her place was here. One instructor's words burned bright in her memory. In the field, you're not shooting targets, you're buying lives. One shot can change everything. Make it count. Raven exhaled. Through the scope, she returned to the machine gun nest she had silenced earlier. Another fighter had scrambled to the weapon, dragging the dead gunner aside, ready to resume fire. She aligned her crosshairs with the narrow strip of forehead visible above the cover. Her heartbeat slowed, her muscles loosened, the noise of battle fading behind the tunnel of her focus. Crack! The insurgent slumped backward before his hands even touched the weapon. She shifted, a man darting between rocks to flank the ranger's crack, another leaning too far from his nest crack. 3 shots, 3 silences. The rhythm of the rifle was becoming the heartbeat of the valley. Below, the rangers finally understood. It wasn't backup saving them. It wasn't command. It was Raven. Holy hell, she's covering us, one shouted, awe slicing through fear. Then let's move, barked, rallying his men. His voice carried a new sharpness fueled by trust. For the first time since the ambush began, the Marines surged forward, no longer huddled in the dirt but advancing tactically, using Raven's shots as shields. But the enemy adapted too. Insurgent commanders barked orders, shifting fire toward the ridge. Dust burst around Raven as incoming rounds sought her silhouette. The stone around her cracked, showering grit into her scope. She flattened, rolled, adjusted her angle. A round whizzed so close it tore a strand of her hair free, the heat of it burning her temple. But still she did not flinch. Instead, she remembered another lesson from sniper school: fear is loud, calm is quiet, stay quiet. She inhaled, exhaled, realigned her crosshairs. Another insurgent rose to lob a grenade toward the pinned squad. Raven steadied, fired. The man dropped, grenade tumbling harmlessly away. Her radio crackled, voice rough but certain. Raven, keep those eyes sharp. We're moving on your shots. That was all the confirmation she needed. Doubt from the past dissolved, replaced by something solid, trust, earned in the heat of fire. She was no longer the sniper some questioned. She was the ridge itself, immovable, untouchable, decisive. Shot by shot, she was writing the only answer the valley would understand. They would not break today. The valley that had once roared with enemy fire now pulsed with a new rhythm, the sharp, deliberate cracks of Raven's rifle. Each shot carved a path through chaos, scattering the precision of the ambush. What had been a death trap was becoming a battlefield where the Marines had a fighting chance. From her perch, Raven tracked targets with surgical calm. Her scope swept left, catching a fighter as he rose to fire an RPG. She squeezed. The crack split the air and the man dropped, the weapon tumbling uselessly down the slope. Without pause, she shifted right, spotting a muzzle flash dancing between jagged rocks. Crack. Silence followed. The rangers below lifted their heads, no longer pressed flat against the dirt. For the first time since the ambush began, they could breathe without tasting despair. "Who the hell's covering us?" one of the Marines shouted over the roar of gunfire. Another ranger, face streaked with dust and sweat, answered with raw certainty, "It's her. It's Raven." The word spread quickly, cutting through the fear. Raven, the sniper on the ridge. The one they had doubted, mocked, questioned. She was the ghost in their corner, the hand keeping death at bay. "Seize the moment. She's got us. Move on my mark. Go, go, go." The rangers surged forward, breaking from their fragile cover. They moved in teams, leapfrogging from boulder to boulder, timing their runs with the rhythm of Raven's shots. Every crack from the ridge was a green light, another enemy neutralized. The squad was no longer running from bullets, they were chasing victory. Raven adjusted constantly, reading the battlefield like a map only she could see. Enemy fighters ducked and shifted, trying to confuse her, but she was patient. A shadow leaned too far from cover, a helmet tilted for a second too long, crack. Precision erased their mistakes. The insurgents, once confident in their ambush, began to falter. Panic flickered through their movements. The kill box they had crafted so carefully was unraveling, their nests dismantled one by one, and in their panic they made themselves more visible. One Marine, pinned behind a slab of stone, called over the radio, "Raven, I need an opening to move." Her reply was simple, calm, steady, "On my shot." Seconds stretched, then crack. The insurgent suppressing his position slumped forward. "Move," she ordered, and he did, sprinting to join his squad, heart hammering with new trust in the unseen voice above. The more she fired, the more the Rangers believed. Every man in the valley shifted from desperation to determination, their movements sharper, their shots more controlled. Raven's overwatch had given them more than cover, it had given them confidence. But the battle was far from finished. Enemy fire still poured from higher ridges, their commanders barking in harsh tongues. Raven spotted two men scrambling with another RPG, setting up to fire down into the heart of the Marine position. She rolled slightly, steadied, and fired. The first man dropped. Before the second could react, another crack split the air, and he joined his comrade in the dust. The Rangers cheered, even as they advanced. "She's clearing the whole damn ridge," one shouted. Yet Raven didn't hear the praise. To her, the world remained narrowed to her scope, her breathing, her trigger. She wasn't seeking glory, she was fulfilling duty. Her focus was unbroken, her face calm against the rifle stock, as if she had become part of the stone itself. Still, she knew the longer she fired, the greater the risk. The enemy wasn't blind. Already, she saw movement, insurgent spotters pointing, rifles redirecting toward her position. They had realized their ambush was crumbling because of one figure on the ridge. Raven adjusted again, shifting her angle, keeping herself unpredictable. She knew what was coming. The battle had turned, yes, but the fight was far from over. The insurgents would not let the ghost on the ridge go unanswered. The Marines no longer crawled through the dirt like prey. They moved with purpose, advancing in bursts, their formation tightening under commands. Raven's rifle cracked in rhythm with their steps, each shot removing an obstacle, each silence marking another cleared path. The valley, once a cage, had transformed into a battlefield they controlled. Where fear had frozen them, now fire surged in their veins. They trusted the unseen eyes above, the steady hand that guided their every move. "Covering fire, push left flank," barked. His voice carried a confidence born from knowing someone was watching the watchers. Raven shifted her scope. 3 insurgents crouched behind a ridge outcrop, preparing to ambush the advancing squad. Their weapons angled, fingers tight on triggers. She exhaled, crack, crack, crack. 3 fell before their ambush could even begin. Below, the Rangers cheered, surging forward. One radioed up with urgency, "Raven, you've got the sky, keep them off us." Her reply was as calm as ever, "Copy, eyes on you." But as she tracked her scope across the ridges, a flash of light froze her blood. Not the erratic spark of gunfire, something steadier, a reflection, a glint of glass catching the sun. Her instinct screamed, "Sniper." Raven rolled, pressing herself flat as a round tore past, so close it whispered heat across her cheek. The stone at her side shattered, spraying grit across her scope. She pulled her rifle close, heart still steady, but every nerve alive with danger. This was no ordinary insurgent. The shot had been clean, disciplined, too precise. Somewhere across the valley, another sniper lay hidden, trained and locked onto her. The duel had begun. The Marines below had no idea. They continued their push, relying on her cover fire. But Raven knew that if she lost this silent contest, her rifle would fall silent, and the Rangers would be blind again. She crawled sideways, slow and deliberate, never lingering where the enemy had already drawn a bead. Another crack ripped the air, shattering the rock where her head had been seconds earlier. Dust clouded her vision, but her training kept her movements fluid. Patience, silence, calculation. She remembered her instructor's words. The other sniper is thinking the same as you. He's breathing slow, watching shadows. The one who panics dies first. Through her scope she scanned. Nothing but jagged stone, smoke, and shifting shadows. But then a twitch. The slightest shift of fabric where it didn't belong, half hidden by rock. Her heartbeat slowed, her finger tightened. Crack! Her round slammed into stone, sparks flying. She'd been close, too close, but not perfect, and the enemy responded instantly. A bullet screamed past, so near it cut a line across her sleeve. The margin was seconds. Below, the Rangers kept moving, unaware of the duel raging above. "Keep firing, Raven. We're almost through," shouted over the radio. She didn't answer. She couldn't, not yet. Every ounce of her focus was locked into the hunt for her unseen rival. The enemy was patient, smart. He didn't fire again, waiting for her to show herself, waiting for a mistake. She slowed her breathing, counting the seconds, letting her rifle become part of the earth beneath her. Then she saw it, the faint glow of heat where his barrel extended, just barely protruding from the cover. He'd been clever, but in the end, every sniper must see. Raven steadied, exhaled, squeezed. Crack! A pause, then the glint vanished. The rival's rifle clattered lifeless against stone, its echo swallowed by the valley. For a moment the world was still. Raven blinked sweat from her eyes, steadying herself. One duel ended, one ridge reclaimed. Below, the Marines pressed forward, their advance unstoppable now. With Raven guarding the sky, nothing could pin them down again. But Raven didn't allow relief. She wiped grit from her cheek, eyes already sweeping the valley for the next threat. Her duty wasn't done. Not until the last man below was safe. The valley roared with fire and smoke, but for Raven, the world narrowed to the thin space between her rifle and the enemy's sights. The rival sniper was gone, silenced by her shot, yet danger still pressed from every side. The insurgents had realized their ambush was crumbling. Furious, they redirected fire toward the ridge, determined to root her out. Bullets ripped into the stone around her perch, splintering rock, showering her with grit. One round struck so close it kicked dust into her scope, blinding her view. Another slammed the ground by her elbow, the concussion rattling her teeth. Raven rolled, keeping low, pulling her rifle against her chest as she slid to a new position. She knew better than to stay still. A sniper who didn't move was a dead one. Below, the Marines pushed hard against the last barricades. Their voices crackled over comms, breathless, alive with adrenaline. "We're close, just a little more," someone shouted. But's voice cut sharper. "Raven, we need those nests cleared or we're dead in the open." She didn't answer yet. Words would break her focus. Instead, she crawled up behind a new line of rocks, steadied her rifle, and scanned through the scope. Her hands were coated in dust, her cheek raw where the stock pressed hard, but her breath remained calm. Slow in, slow out. Through the smoke, she spotted 3 figures repositioning a heavy weapon, its tripod being dragged into place. If they set it up, the Rangers would be shredded before reaching cover. Raven settled her crosshairs. Crack. One fell. Crack. Another slumped against the weapon. The third scrambled backward in terror before a Ranger's burst cut him down. The Marines surged forward, momentum building with every shot she fired. They no longer asked if she was there. They knew. Every step they took was shielded by her invisible hand. But Raven's calm was tested again. A sudden burst of fire slammed into her ridge from the far right. The shots were too controlled, too deliberate. Her blood ran cold. Another sniper. She ducked, rolling into cover as a bullet shattered the stone where her head had just been. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, but her breathing stayed steady. Fear was loud, calm was quiet. She chose quiet. She crawled further along the ridge, every move calculated. The enemy sniper had patience just like her. He didn't fire wildly, he was waiting for her to expose herself. Her memory sparked with her instructor's words. Duels aren't about speed, they're about control. The one who breathes last, shoots last, wins. She lay still, letting seconds stretch. Dust blew across her face, grit stung her eyes, but she kept watching. Then, there, a flicker of movement, the faintest outline of a rifle barrel shifting in the rocks opposite. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Crack! Her shot rang out, silence followed. The rifle barrel fell, lifeless against the stone. She inhaled, steadying herself. Victory came not with cheers but with silence, the kind of silence only a sniper knew, the silence of survival. Below, the Rangers finally breached the enemy's defenses. Explosions tore through the last barricades, smoke billowing as insurgents scattered. Marines stormed forward, clearing positions room by room, rock by rock. Over the radio's voice broke through, raw but grateful. "Raven, Ridge is yours. You saved our asses." She didn't respond, not out of pride, not out of coldness, but because her work wasn't finished. She kept scanning, searching for movement, her rifle still warm against her cheek. For Raven, there was no victory yet, not until every last Ranger walked out of that valley alive. The ambush had broken, the Marines had pushed through, but the ridge had nearly claimed her life, and she knew the fight still wasn't done. Smoke still clung to the valley floor like a restless fog, curling around shattered barricades and broken stone. The Marines had pushed forward inch by inch, and for the first time since the ambush began, the end seemed near. But war never ended clean. The insurgents, desperate and furious, for one last counterattack. From her ridge, Raven spotted it first, figures gathering in the shadow of a crumbled wall, weapons raised, voices shouting in defiance. Dozens, maybe more. It wasn't order, it was desperation. A final surge meant to drown the Rangers in chaos. Her voice finally cut through the comms, calm but sharp. "You've got a wave incoming. North wall, they're charging." Didn't hesitate. Copy, Rangers set defense. Ravens got overwatch, make every bullet count. The Marines tightened their formation, crouching behind fractured vehicles and rubble, muzzles angled at the choke point. Their bodies screamed with fatigue. Their ammunition was running low, but their spirits burned hot. They knew she was still above, watching. That was enough. The insurgents surged from cover, a chaotic tide of gunfire and war cries. The valley exploded again with thunder. Marines fired in short, desperate bursts, their rifles spitting flame. Raven's rifle cracked in reply, her scope sweeping like a metronome of death. Each pull of the trigger slowed the charge, cutting down leaders, silencing heavy gunners before they could spray. But the wave didn't stop. A rocket streaked toward the Marines' position. Raven caught it mid-flight, tracking the man who'd launched it. Crack! The launcher dropped, the man with it. The rocket veered wide, detonating harmlessly against the cliff. The Rangers shouted in relief, pressing their fire harder. Still the attackers pressed closer. Shouts turned to screams. The valley floor became a storm of dust, blood, and fire. One Marine fell, clutching his shoulder, dragging himself behind cover. Another stumbled under a burst that tore across his helmet. Chaos clawed at the line, threatening to tear it apart. From her perch, Raven moved faster, almost mechanical. Her rifle never hesitated. Crack, crack, crack. The recoil hammered her shoulder raw, but she ignored the pain. Every second mattered. Every shot kept the line alive. Her scope found, leading from the front, firing with one hand while dragging a wounded Ranger with the other. He didn't look up, didn't need to. He trusted her. The insurgents were close enough now that the Marines switched to grenades, their shouts drowned by thunderous blasts. Smoke and fire rolled across the field. Raven shifted, scanning for stragglers, her eye catching a shadow creeping along the ridge near the ranger's flank. Another ambush forming. She didn't think she moved. One hand grabbed her sidearm, firing blindly to suppress while her rifle swung into place. Her scope locked onto the shadow just as it raised its weapon. Crack! The figure crumpled, sliding back into the rocks. The charge faltered. Momentum broke. The attacker's defiance dissolved into retreat. The few who still stood fired wild shots as they scrambled for cover, disappearing into the ruins they'd once controlled. And then silence. The smoke cleared, leaving only echoes and the ragged breaths of men who had survived the impossible. The Marines stood in scattered groups, weapons trembling in exhausted hands. They weren't cheering. They were too spent, too raw, but their eyes carried something fiercer than victory. They had endured. From her ridge, Raven lowered her rifle for the first time in hours. Her hands shook as the weight of adrenaline drained away. Sweat clung to her brow, her cheek burned where grit had cut into her skin, but her eyes remained sharp. She scanned once more, ensuring no threat lingered. Only when the valley lay still did she exhale. Over the radio's voice broke through, heavy with fatigue but steady. "Raven, it's over. We're alive because of you." She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the silence seep in. Then she spoke, her tone calm, almost detached. "Mission secure, ridge clear." It wasn't victory she felt. It was survival, for her, for them. And survival was enough. The valley, once deafening with gunfire, now lay quiet, too quiet. Smoke drifted in lazy columns, curling skyward as if the earth itself was sighing with relief. The acrid tang of gunpowder lingered, mixing with the dust of shattered stone. The Marines moved slowly, shoulders slumped, weapons hanging loose. They were alive, but the weight of survival pressed on them heavier than their gear. They checked the wounded, counted ammunition, and whispered names of those who wouldn't be walking out. Up on the ridge, Raven remained prone, rifle pressed against her shoulder, eye still glued to the scope. She swept the ruins again and again, refusing to believe it was over until the silence proved it. Only then did she lower the weapon. Her cheek bore a deep mark from hours of pressure. Her shoulder ached from recoil. She barely noticed. Her comms crackled. Voice, strained but steady, came through. "Raven, you can stand down. We're clear." For a long moment she didn't move. Standing down wasn't easy. A sniper's world was patience, vigilance, the endless wait for the one threat everyone else missed. To let go of that felt unnatural. But finally she exhaled and rolled onto her back, staring up at the pale sky. The sun had shifted high above, indifferent to the carnage below. Time hadn't stopped, even if it felt like it should have. She rose slowly, legs stiff from hours on the ground, and began the careful climb down the ridge. Her movements were deliberate, every step controlled. To anyone watching, she looked unshaken, carved from stone. But inside, her muscles trembled, and her heart carried the heavy thrum of everything she had just endured. When she reached the valley floor, the Rangers noticed her at once. They had never seen her up close before, only heard her voice, felt her unseen protection. To them, she had been a ghost on the ridge. Now, standing among them, she was real. A young Marine, face streaked with grime, spoke first. "You're the reason we're still breathing." His voice cracked, half exhaustion. Another gripped her shoulder briefly, a silent "thank you," before limping off to help the wounded. Approached last. His uniform was torn, his arm bloodied, but his eyes carried the steadiness of a man who had led his team through hell and back. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to understand how one person could turn the tide of a battle. "You answered when no one else could," he said finally. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. "They called for backup and you were it. From one ridge with one rifle, you gave us a fighting chance." Raven didn't meet his eyes. She adjusted the sling of her weapon instead, her face unreadable. "You fought your way out," she replied. "I just made sure you could." Almost smiled, but he didn't press. Some soldiers carried their victories quietly, and she was one of them. The Rangers gathered what they could, preparing for extraction. The valley looked like ruins of a forgotten war, but to them, it would always be remembered as the place they survived because of a voice on the radio and the crack of a distant rifle. As the helicopters finally thundered overhead, kicking up dust in heavy clouds, Raven stood a little apart from the others. She watched them board, helping one another, leaning on shoulders, carrying the wounded. Brotherhood forged in fire. One ranger glanced back at her as the ramp closed, raising a hand in silent salute. She gave the smallest nod in return. When the rotors drowned the valley in sound and lifted the survivors into the sky, Raven remained on the ground. She didn't climb aboard. Her mission wasn't medals or recognition. Her place was the ridge, wherever the next ridge might be. The dust settled. Silence returned. And somewhere far beyond that valley, her legend would begin to spread, not as a name in headlines, but as a story whispered among soldiers. When the Rangers called for backup, it was her rifle on the ridge that answered.